millions of lives torn from their homeland, sold onto bondage, and forced into a life of unimaginable suffering. This is the story of the African slave trade. Hello Cap, welcome to HistEduHub, where we explore the pivotal moments that have shaped our world. Today, we are discussing one of the darkest chapters in human history, the African slave trade. We'll explore how it started, the brutal realities faced by millions, and its lasting impact on the world. Let's begin. The African slave trade, also known as the Transatlantic Slave Trade, began in the 15th to 16th century, driven by European colonial powers in search of cheap labors for their colonies in the Americas. Portugal was among the first to engage in the slave trade, followed by Spain, France, Britain, and other European nations. Initially, trade was conducted with the consent of local African rulers, but it soon escalated into brutal and systematic capture of men, women, and children. Did you know that between 16th and 19th centuries, an estimated amount of 12.5 million Africans were forcibly taken from their homeland? Once captured, enslaved Africans were forced onto the ship for the horrific journey known as the Middle Passage. This was the leg of triangular trade route that transported enslaved Africans to the Americas. The conditions on these ships were inhumane. Enslaved people were packed tightly onto the ship's hold, often chained together with a little room to move. Disease, malnutrition, and abuse were ramped, leading to high mortality rate during the voyage. Historians estimate that approximately 15% of those enslaved died during the Middle Passage and had their bodies thrown overboard. Did you know that the journey across the Atlantic could take anywhere from 6 weeks to several months depending on the weather conditions? Upon arrival in the Americas, the horror of enslavement continued. Enslaved Africans were sold at the auction and forced to work on plantation, in mines, and in households, subjected to relentless labor under brutal conditions. The plantation owners relied on the labor of enslaved people to grow crops like sugar, tobacco, and cotton, which were then exported back to Europe. The wealth generated from these labor fueled the economies of colonial powers, further entrenching the institution of slavery. Resistance among the enslaved were quite common, from subtle acts of defiance to outright rebellions. However, those who resisted faced severe punishment, including beatings, mutilation, and even death. Did you know that the Haitian Revolution, led by enslaved Africans, resulted in the first successful revolt in history, leading to the independence of Haiti in 1804? As the brutal realities of slavery became more widely known and understood, opposition to the institution grew. The abolition movement gained momentum in the late 18th and early 19th century, driven by activists, former slaves, and religious groups. In Britain, the abolitionist named William Wilberforce played a key role in the fight to end the slave trade. His efforts, along with those others, led to the passage of Slave Trade Act in 1807, which abolished the transatlantic slave trade in the British Empire. However, it wasn't until 1833 the Slavery Abolition Act was passed, leading to the gradual emancipation of enslaved people throughout British Empire. In the United States, the slavery was not abolished until Civil War ended in 1865. Did you know that even after the abolition of slavery, many former slaves faced harsher conditions, including sharecropping and segregation, well into the 20th century? The African slave trade left a profound and lasting impact on the world. It devastated African societies, stripping them of millions of their people and disrupting their cultural and economic structures. In the Americas and Europe, the legacy of slave trade is still felt today. The wealth generated by the slavery contributed to the rise of powerful nations, while the descendants of enslaved people continued to fight against systemic racism and inequality. It's important to remember this dark chapter in history, not just to honor the memory of those who suffered, but to understand the roots of ongoing social and economic disparities. Did you know that the transatlantic slave trade is now considered a crime against humanity, with various countries recognizing and commemorating its victims? The African slave trade was a tragedy that shaped the course of history in profound ways. As we reflect on this painful past, let us also commit on building a future where such inhumanity is never repeated. Comment your views on this. Thank you for watching. If you found this video informative, please consider subscribing to HistEduHub, where we explore important topics in history, education, and engineering. Let us continue learning and growing together.